For everyone that doesn't know, this is Terzi. He writes our blogs and he has a lot of knowledge with web content and really like writing, knowing how to pull people in with the content we have to kind of get them to see what we're doing. So I'm gonna hand it over to him because he can talk a lot better about this than I can.
So, hi everybody. My name is Matt Terzi. I am Tempton Table's digital content specialist. Basically, it's a really fancy way of saying that I'm a blogger, but a professional one, and I like to think kind of good at my job. So today, I want to go over written content for your website. It's one of those topics that's often sort of glazed over. A lot of people think of it as this sort of afterthought thing that you kind of add onto your marketing plan, and it's not very important. In reality, really important. It's huge for your SEO. It's big for engagement, driving a lot of traffic to your website, getting people to pay attention. We're going to go over kind of all that in a minute. So what we're going to do is, I can't teach somebody how to be a really great writer in like an hour. So if you're coming into this and you've never really written anything since like high school, which a lot of people haven't, or college, then this might just kind of be kind of a basic introduction to writing. It's a process. It takes years to really get good at. So, hopefully this will just kind of get you moving in the right direction. Stuff that I kind of wish I knew when I first started, 14 years ago. Aging myself here. So we're going to jump right in. Let's talk about what content is and how we're defining content. So for the most part, a lot of the content that we're going to be focusing on in this is going to be related to blogs. It's kind of my main thing. But it's not just blog content. It refers to content that you write for a landing page, your products and how you're describing your products and services on your website, what you're posting on social media, and anything that you do in print. So if you're doing, say, a brochure, a catalog, flyers for your business, anything like that, the writing that you use there actually does matter. How people read it and how they interpret it is very important. So we're going to kind of go over how to do a lot of this writing as we progress. A lot of what we're going to talk about now, though, is that content for your blog and for your landing pages, which is where most of the content that you write is going to end up if you decide to add a lot of content to your page. So there's a lot of pros and cons to your content. There's stuff that good content brings to your website, and then there's things that you don't want to bring to your website with bad content. So let's start with the good content. Good content should be informative. Informative content drives engagement. It gets people interested in your products and services. It tells them that you exist, which is obviously important. And it helps you build a good relationship and rapport with your customer base. It answers their questions directly, and it establishes you as somebody they can trust, somebody who's a professional. You know what you're talking about. You know what you're doing. Obviously important for any small business, let alone in our industry where it's very important. It builds your brand, and it gives your brand a voice, which we're going to talk about in a lot more depth later on. We're also going to be talking about SEO quite a bit, and your content is sort of on the front lines of your SEO strategy and your ability to land the really valuable keywords. You can do that with other things. You can do it with, like videos or, kind of shorthand stuff. But if you really want to land SEO and you really want to improve your SEO, your keyword saturation, it's really important that you have good content. It gives your customers a chance to engage with your company even when you're closed, you're not, you're on a holiday or whatever. Your content exists online even when you're not online. So it's really important that your content is written well so that when somebody's looking at your website at 3 o'clock in the morning, they're getting hooked. They're, following you. And it allows you to make a customer come back to your website even without your interaction. Like, you don't have to directly speak with a customer. Your content's doing that for you. And there's some ways that you can kind of tell if content is good. Um, One of the big ones I think is kind of often overlooked is that it's written in plain but not stupid language. And what I mean by that is a lot of writers think, a lot of content writers and a lot of business owners tend to think, well, my customers, I know my customers, and they're not, this is where I think their, intellect level is or what their reading level is. So they try to dumb down their writing. What they're actually doing is undercutting the value of their own content, and it makes it look kind of messy and unprofessional. They're trying to speak a little more conversational, and you don't ever have to do that. Your readers are, you can basically just assume that your readers are, as well versed as you are. We're going to talk about professional style guides in a little bit. They're important to follow. They're usually very expensive, but we're going to, explain how to kind of get around that. There's a lot of spelling and grammar errors in bad content, so you want to make sure that you've got that right. We're going to talk about how to structure your content so that a person reading it on a computer or on a phone can really follow it cleanly, and it's not as simple as it sounds. There's actually quite a bit to it. That the keywords that you're using in your content is used contextually, meaning you're not just like kind of shoving keywords into your article. You're not stuffing them. The phrase is keyword stuffing. You're not just kind of cramming them in the article just in the hopes that it's going to generate page views for you. Instead, you're using the keywords in a way that kind of flows smoothly with your content. And then you want to make sure that your branding and the voice that you're creating for your company is, followed and respected throughout your entire content, which is very important. We're going to talk quite a bit about voice in a little bit. Now, some of the things that you can tell make content bad. There's a lot of bad content on the internet. I like to think that it's like 60% of the content on the internet is kind of bad. It doesn't really fulfill the goals of the person who wrote it. And there's easy ways to spot it, and there's easy ways to avoid having bad content of your own. Number one, of course, spelling and grammar, typos, trying to be pedantic, using big words. I love the word pedantic because it's the only word that describes itself. It's a word that means like a big, stupid word that you don't really need to use. And a lot of people will just kind of cram that stuff in there to make their content sound smarter. You don't have to do that either. It's the exact opposite of talking down to a person that's trying to talk up to them. You don't need to do that. Content that's really disorganized. There's no structure. It's just kind of a mess. 1 minute you're talking about, your party tents, and then you want to tell a story. Great, but then you go into some other story that has nothing to do with anything, and then the reader's joining you for this long-winded thing that you don't need to really be doing. Emotive content for a business is a big no-no. If you're doing a business article, you don't want to be angry or aggressive or say anything offensive, or you just want to kind of avoid that stuff. They're not there to read that, and it just comes across as unprofessional, and it takes away from the quality of your article otherwise. So try to avoid that when you can. It's written for the wrong reasons. That's a lot of bad content is written with kind of the wrong goals in mind. We're going to talk about that as well shortly. One of the biggest ones is that your content doesn't really offer any value to your reader. If a person's clicking and reading your article, they're doing it for a reason. We're going to talk about that as well in a second. I keep saying that. You want to make sure that, how do you put it? You want to make sure that every piece of content that you're writing and every article that you're producing holds some kind of meaningful value, not just for your company, but for the person reading that content. If they're not getting value out of it, they're going to bounce. They have no interest in what you have to say unless they're getting something out of it too. It's got to be kind of reciprocal. You want to make sure that your information is accurate. We already mentioned it earlier. We're going to mention it again. You're not stuffing keywords. It's very, very bad to do. And articles that are just kind of poorly packaged, they're put together badly. There's one gigantic paragraph that runs on for days. There's a really kind of crummy looking, low resolution photo that's kind of misshapen and it makes all the text do funky stuff on your site. There's a lot of kind of things that you don't want to do in terms of how you're packaging this content. It's kind of a broad subject. We can't really touch on all of it, but we are going to talk about quite a bit of that in the next few minutes here. I know a lot of writers. I've been doing this for, a decade and a half or so. So I've noticed over the years, every writer I know, they pretty much all, the really good ones, kind of share these same qualities. They all kind of do the same stuff. So these are just the best habits that good writers should have. They always say yes to reading. Every good writer I know will, every opportunity they get to sit down and read something, they're going to be sitting and reading. They're not going to be like channel surfing or whatever. They're going to have a book open. And it's not just books. It's also, newspaper articles, even the ones you don't have to agree with. You have to read those too. You have to try to read a lot of blogs, even on subjects that you don't really, necessarily care about. It's just when you have an opportunity to read and you've got some time to kill, read and try to study it and try to learn what they're doing. Another good habit, how do you get to Carnegie Hall? Practice. You have to spend as much time as you can when you've got the time to try to write on subjects that you don't know anything about, write something fictional, create a short story, whatever you want to do, but just practice writing and try to get that incorporated into your daily life wherever you can. If you're writing a text to somebody, take a little extra time and make it a longer text. If it annoys them, try to measure out who you're doing that with. But for the most part, just try to practice writing whenever you can. Can't stress this one enough. Always take your time. You're not in a race. There's never a time when your content's going to be made better by racing to the end. If you're rushing through your content, you're not writing good content. Some articles will take 20 minutes to write. Some will take 5 hours to write. It really boils down to the individual article that you're doing or the individual piece of content. And you want to make sure that you're taking your time. You're giving yourself time to think through the subject matter and present something articulate. You don't want to just kind of throw a bunch of words on the page and then go on to the next thing. There's really no such thing as kind of a short or quick article, especially for blogs. They kind of exist, but you have to measure out, your keyword and stuff like that. We'll talk about that. If you don't know a word, Google it. Simple. Everyone kind of knows to do that already. Quality always wins over quantity. It's not a matter of how many pieces of content you're publishing. That doesn't actually matter. It's the quality of the content. One article, really well written, with really good keywords, can generate 20 or 30,000 page views, and a bunch of kind of lackluster articles that are kind of thrown together quickly. It might take 50 articles to do the same amount of good that one good article did. So it's not a matter of quality, or it's not a matter of quantity. Don't think of it as I need to write 500 articles today. Think about it as how good is the content I'm writing. And then one last point, and we're going to kind of mention this a few times as well. Every time you finish a piece of content, take your time, slow down, read it back slowly. Take your time to look at it, absorb what you're saying. You're not just looking for, bad punctuation or a typo, a spelling error, or whatever. You're trying to take the time to absorb what you're actually saying and comprehend it as a person who's reading it is going to comprehend it. When you're studying this content to learn how to write it and to learn what you're going to write, you're going to end up kind of developing some biases that you want to kind of get rid of. So reading it back slowly, trying to interpret it as somebody who's reading it rather than the person who wrote it is important. That's going to help make sure that your content has a good flow and that it's actually reaching its goals. So real quick, let's talk about why people actually read your content. It really always boils down to three things. Apart from the random internet surfer who just kind of stumbles across your content, willy-nilly, for the most part, your content's going to be read by the same three types of people 99 times out of 100. You're going to have the people who are searching the internet for a specific thing. They're going on Google and they're typing, where can I rent a party tent? Where can I buy a bounce house? Whatever their keyword is. They're searching for that thing specifically. So you are answering that question. You're creating content that is targeted toward that specific question. You're drawing them in with your content. Um, Another type of person is somebody who just is out goofing around the internet and they want to read something entertaining. And once in a while, as a writer, it's a good thing to what I like to call ditch the pitch, meaning that you're not trying to sell them anything. You're not trying to say, hey, buy this thing, or here's why this service is so important to your whatever. Like, instead, you're just saying, this is a fun article. It's kind of goofy. We're just talking about a fun thing. I like to do history articles. If you follow the blog on TNT, you'll see that I write a lot of content, kind of the history of party tents or the history of bounce houses. I like to kind of explore those things. It's fun. And if you read the blog regularly, you probably have already read those, and you might like those because they're fun. So it's good to write those once in a while, and people do like that content. It does pretty well. And then third, last but not least, of course, you've got your established readers, people who are coming to your blog. They're visiting your website. They already had every intention of doing it. They're already following you. They're kind of further along in sort of the sales funnel than a regular person who's just finding you for the first time. They already know you. They already know your content. They're more engaging with you because they know you, they like you, they trust you. So let's talk about what your goal should be. And this is where a lot of people kind of, I think, goof up when they're sitting down to write a blog. It's kind of the first thing you end up fixing when you're a content writer and you're kind of going into a new blog for the first time. It's something that is very often misunderstood. There are only so many goals that your content can actually fulfill. And if you end up with these kind of loftier ideas of what it can and can't do, you're not going to really hit the targets that you're going for. The big one is that they drive a lot of traffic. If it's good content, it'll drive a ton of traffic to your website. Raises awareness of your company. It allows your brand to have a voice. It can actually define what that voice is and how people interpret it. It establishes brand authority, meaning that you're a recognized company in your area. Your general customer base, potential and otherwise, kind of know that you're out there. They know that you exist. You've established yourself as a known force in your area. Your content can build consumer trust. It can show them that you're competent, you know what you're doing. It can drive your engaged customers directly toward products and services that you already have. At the end of an article, you say, hey, we were just talking about, which party tent you might want for a wedding. So let's now talk about, the party tents that we've got. We've got these beautiful high-peak tents. We're going to try to, tell you why our service is better than anybody else. That gives you an opportunity to do it. It's another doorway that introduces you to a customer that you might not have had without that content. And then there's evergreen content, which provides value not just short-term, but long-term. And I think that especially when it comes to blogging and landing pages for websites, evergreen content should be your main driving force. What evergreen means is it's a piece of content that is relevant today, and it'll still be relevant tomorrow. It'll still be relevant 3 years from now. I wrote articles 12, 15 years ago that are still getting hits today because it was really evergreen, and they're terms that people are still looking up. You really want that kind of content. If you're going to write a blog, it's better to write one blog that dominates a keyword for 5 or 6 years than to have to keep every year refreshing it and redoing it. It's time consuming. It's a hassle. Nobody wants to do that. So evergreen content is kind of your main goal. It's kind of what you really want out of each piece of content. Not every piece of content can be evergreen, but if it can be, go for it. Okay, so now we're going to talk about writing with purpose and writing with style and writing with voice. And those are three very different things. So writing with purpose is making sure that your content is fulfilling goals. And it's not just your goals, it's the goal of the reader. Because the best way to make sure that you have readers is to fulfill the goals of the people trying to read it. So, oops, I hit the thing, sorry. So every time you sit down to write a piece of content, you should always ask yourself, why is a person going to sit down and read what I'm writing? Are they interested in it? Does it provide any actual value to them? Um, why is somebody going to take the time out of their day to absorb what I'm trying to write? If you're writing a piece of content that is just for you, you're the only person who's going to read it. Like, you can't write something and then just magically expect somebody to read it. They have to have a reason. They have to have a draw to click on that in the first place, and then to actually continue reading and get through your content. Every time you write a piece of content, it's a good habit to say, if somebody else wrote this, if some stranger that you never met wrote the exact same article that you just wrote, would you sit here and read it, or would you just say, I'm not bothering with this, and skip and move on to the next thing? And if you wouldn't sit and read it, why? What did you get wrong? Where can you make corrections? Where can you improve your content? After you've fulfilled the reader's needs, which has to always come first when you're writing content, there is never an excuse to put your own needs in front of a reader's needs. Are you matching your own content goals? Do you have internal links to the pages on your website that you want to be linking to? Do you have a call to action? Is it worded correctly? Are people going to actually want to follow through to that? Is the writing on brand? I spent all this time working on my company's voice. Is this piece of content actually living up to that, or do I need to make some tweaks? And last but not least, always make sure you take the time to, we mentioned this earlier, taking your time when you're writing content, making sure that you're getting it all correct. You want to make sure that when you're writing a piece of content, you are taking the time to question, research, think, articulate. What do I mean by that? Answer a question, even if it's not one that they're asking already, but make sure that you have, a question that you're answering. You're providing information to the reader. You do your research. You try to research the topic objectively. You're trying to find information that might go against the grain of what you already think about a thing. Never approach a piece of content thinking, well, I already know everything there is to know about this. You don't. There's millions of ways to do just about anything. So take your time, research it thoroughly. Try to challenge your own beliefs as often as you possibly can. I think that every writer should be doing that as often as they realistically can. Think about what you're saying. Take your time to think, hey, is this solving the question? Is this solving the problem? Is it answering the question? Or am I just creating more questions that are left unanswered? Is there something I can do to answer those or avoid them? And then articulate. You make sure that you're actually stating what you're trying to state and that you're making the point that you're trying to get across. Those 4 rules I try to apply to every piece of content I write. I didn't kind of figure out that system until it was kind of later in the game, and I kind of wish that I had known that early on. So question, research, think, articulate. If you're taking notes, please write those down. They're going to really help your content quite a bit. So let's talk about style. There are a lot of style guides out there. We're going to talk about some of them. We're going to try to go briefly. I know that I'm running kind of long here. So just real quick, the one that most professional bloggers use is AP style. BuzzFeed style is growing. So what a style guide is it's a list of rules and guidelines that define how you actually write. They affect your grammar, your punctuation, how you're structuring your content. There's a lot of rules, and when you first come across a style guide or a style book, you go, this is stupid. Why am I going to waste my time doing all this garbage? It's like 500 steps that are extra that I don't need to do. But style guides are actually really important. They're designed with psychology and physiology in mind. They're designed so that the human brain, when it's digesting content, a style guide is designed so that it smooths that process out, so that it goes down cleaner. There are certain rules that a lot of people look at them and they're like, that's a stupid rule. Why do you do that? Well, we do that because there's scientific evidence that shows that it's valuable. That it's going to make your content read better, and that the people reading it are going to get through it easier. Style guides are immensely important. There's only really two that if you're really doubling down on like blogs and landing pages, AP style is pretty much where it's at. If your audience tends to be a lot younger, kind of young millennials or the Generation Z crowd, I would say BuzzFeed style guide is good. You'll see here that I've got Chicago style. That's really if you're like into print. It's kind of fading out. So is the Modern Language Association style manual. It's not really a place in the modern world anymore. APA style is great if you're writing a term paper on biology, not so important if you're a blogger. So the ones that you really care about are AP style. If your audience tends to be a lot younger than the typical event and party rental business customer is, then you might want to look into BuzzFeed style, which is heavily rooted in AP style. BuzzFeed style is a little easier to use. So if you just kind of want something simpler and you don't want to really have as many strict rules, then BuzzFeed might be for you. But if you're really firm, like, I've got to get this done, I want to do the content as correct as possible, then AP style is where it's at. Let's talk about voice. There's so much to this subject. And after this, I'm going to stop for one quick second and just ask Matt if there's any questions. So voice is a really important, really broad subject, and there is absolutely no way we can cover everything there is to know about voice in the context of this very short, teeny tiny webinar. There's no way. So instead, we're just going to kind of give you the brief bullet point of voice, and then if you really get into writing and you really want to do this for your website down the road, take some time, Google it, try to read as much as you can. But here's kind of the broad points on voice. So voice is how you're taking that style guide that we just discussed and making it work specifically for your website. So how you're talking to people, the language that you're using, the sort of style of writing that you're applying to your writing. And it's defined by, on this right side over here, you'll see that we've got this list of adjectives. We're going to talk about that in a second. But as a general rule, your voice is kind of the main factor that defines how your brand is interpreted by people when they first come to you. It's like how your audience is, the mood, so to speak, that you're setting for the person reading your content. A lot of companies will just pick one adjective and they'll say, this is the thing. We're a focused company, so everything's going to be focused. And some companies are kind of silly and they go with like 35 adjectives and they say that we're all these things. You don't want to do either of those things. What you want to do, in my experience anyway, is pick 3 to 5 adjectives, stick to those 3 to 5. So let's say you were dealing mostly with wedding tents. You might say that you're elegant, sophisticated, and professional, right? If you're doing, bounce houses and other commercial inflatables for parties and whatnot, you might say that you're fun, you're family-oriented, you're safe, obviously important with inflatables. So, pick a few that really speak to your company and your brand and what you kind of want your customer to think about your company, and then try to apply those to your writing. If you're fun, for instance, you might, be a little lighthearted, tell some jokes here and there. If you're sophisticated, you might, try to use bigger words or, try to sound a little more, upper class or however you want to phrase that. If you're professional, you would talk about your insurance and stuff and like how professional your company is. So there's a lot of different ways to kind of work voice into all your writing. The more experienced you get, the easier that becomes. So real quick, are there any questions or should we skip
on? So we don't really have any questions in so far.
Okay.
So the only thing I was going to bring up, because I know we've talked about voice a lot, like in meetings and stuff.
Yeah.
So, I know you touched on it a little bit already as well. But, oh God, I had a question. I kind of lost it there. But what I was going to try and ask you to maybe elaborate on is sort of that idea of like there's a bunch of different people that can write information about this kind of stuff because like anyone that knows information on tents or like anything else out there can write that information. So how would you try and define your voice in a sense? Like, would you try and write out the voice depending on the way you think the audience would react, or would you try and create a voice first and hope that people would come to that voice?
I think as a business owner, you tend to kind of have an idea in your head of how you want your customer to interpret your company, how you're hoping, your customer is going to look at you. So I would say kind of start there. Start with your kind of overarching goal of what you're hoping your customer would think of your company, and then from there, you can start tacking on, what your customer kind of already thinks. If your customers kind of have this idea that you're approachable, or they're constantly telling you, oh, it's so easy to talk to you. I have such an easy time. It's like you're, part of our family. Like, we come to you all the time for our, bounce house rentals. So we know you and we trust you. Then you might want to start adding that approachable voice into your content because it's something that you already know you're doing well. As a rule, though, I would say that when you're just starting out to create your voice, you should probably just pick 3 to 5 of those adjectives. Not necessarily the ones I've listed there. It can be any adjective, but pick a few of those and then kind of root your writing in those adjectives that you chose, and then grow out your voices as needed.
Okay. And then we did have one other question come in. It was asking about like what type of articles are best to write, sort of in this industry. Would it be how-tos, or is there other things that you found?
I personally think how-tos are the best. And see, we are this, not to sound braggy, but we're kind of a big company, right? We're a big national company. So I don't really get to do a lot of local writing. And I keep coming across question keywords that really don't matter for our company because we're not trying to sell, stuff in like Phoenix or wherever. We're kind of a national company. So question keywords, we're going to talk about those in a minute. Question keywords are huge. They're incredibly valuable. They allow you to answer questions, and those, in my experience, drive. For Tent and Table, I can say that they drive probably about 90 to 95% of our traffic. They're really big. I think we had like 120. It's kind of inside baseball, but we had like around 120 or 130,000 page views last year on the blog. Probably 100,000 of those were question keywords, just that we're answering a lot of questions. So we'll talk about that in a minute, but those are definitely the ones that you want to be targeting as kind of creating a base for your content, I would say.
Okay. Yeah, I think you're good to go on then with your next section.
Okay, let's move along then. So let's talk about the tools of the trade. Thankfully, everything that you're going to do as a content creator is essentially free, especially if you've already got a website. There are tools that exist that cost money. Honestly, you don't need them, especially if you're creating a blog. The industry standard, what's called a content management system, or a CMS, is WordPress. It's standard. If you already have a website, you probably have already heard of WordPress. Some of you are already using WordPress. What you might not realize is that WordPress isn't just kind of for making a website. It's mainly designed for creating blogs. And so if you're just starting out, I strongly recommend WordPress. There are other options out there. Wix and Weebly are kind of popular. If you don't really want to do any of the technical stuff and you want to leave that to a professional, Squarespace costs money, but they can get that done for you. Otherwise, WordPress, free, really simple. There's like a zillion plugins for it that can do just about anything you need it to do. WordPress is just where it's at. There's 2 versions of WordPress. There's WordPress.com, which is like a paid service. They basically host a WordPress blog for you. And then there's WordPress.org, which is like free. You can go to that website and download a bunch of stuff that you put on a server. If you don't have a lot of technical expertise, I wouldn't try to install WordPress yourself. But if you have a hosting company like DreamHost or GoDaddy, several of the other ones, I think Bluehost does it as well. They will install WordPress for you and get it all set up so that all you have to do is pick a theme, read a couple of tutorial blogs real quick, or watch a couple of videos on YouTube. It takes no time at all to set up a blog. And then you're off to the races. It's pretty simple. You just kind of get it installed, pick a theme. There's like millions of them. A lot of them are free. Start writing content. Bob's your uncle. You're pretty much off, ready to go. If you're using WordPress, and I strongly recommend you do, there is one plugin above all others that I think everyone who's using WordPress should be using, and that is Yoast SEO. The spelling of it is on the page there. Yoast is a plugin that you absolutely just have to have if you're going to create a blog on WordPress. If you're handling other content on WordPress, Yoast is just where it's at. So Yoast is an SEO-focused plugin that tells you how your readability is, meaning how readable is your content, and it tells you how your SEO is doing. Are you using the right keyword? Are you using this keyword too often? Are you not using it enough? Do you need to put it more places, and where specifically to put it? Yoast kind of will walk you through a lot of that, and it'll answer a lot of your SEO questions on the fly as you're doing stuff. And what's really helpful about Yoast is that when you're done writing your content, it's going to provide you with a scoring system for your SEO and for your readability separately. So you can click on this little tab and it'll show you if it's green, meaning you're all good, don't make any changes. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. If it's orange, there's still some things to improve. And if it's red, yikes, you need to take some time and really fix that up. Yoast will lay all that out for you. It makes it really simple to edit. I will tell you that it's kind of a pain in the butt to get it to all be green all of the time. You are going to occasionally come across, oranges and reds, and then you're going to end up backtracking and figuring out how to fix your content and edit it. But it's always right. Yoast is trustworthy. And I guarantee you that an article that scores green on SEO and readability in Yoast, 10 times out of 10 will outperform an article that doesn't. So definitely install that. And again, it's free. It's a paid version. If you really want it, you don't really need it. You're good with the free version. Okay, so we're gonna try to get through these a little quicker. I know I'm running a little long here. There are some hard rules for writing content on the internet. They're pretty universal for the most part to every style guide. These seem arbitrary. These seem like rules that somebody's just making up out of thin air, but they do matter. We'll briefly try to go through this list as quickly as we can. I know there's a lot here, and there's still more to do. Excuse me. Rule number one: your high school English teacher told you to use two spaces. That's incorrect, or at least it is now. Like back in the day, you used two spaces because typewriters didn't have a space correctly. So that dates back to using typewriters. We don't use those anymore. Two spaces in modern content is the equivalent of four spaces back in the day. So you're creating a bigger, longer space between your words. That actually does slow down the human eye. It's called a stopgap. It literally slows down your human eye so that it takes longer for you to interpret all the words on the page. And it's a minor thing, and you might not even think that you notice it, but your brain actually subconsciously does. So only use one space between sentences. Most people aren't going to notice it, but it does still matter. You want to try to keep sentences and paragraphs short. I'm not going to go into too many details there because if you're using Yoast on WordPress, it's going to tell you, hey, your sentence is too long, and it'll show you how to fix that. Try to keep your paragraphs down to a single idea. If you're writing one paragraph is, introducing the party tent that you just got. The next one's talking about the features of that party tent. You're not kind of rambling and going through a whole bunch of different ideas. Speaking of rambling, despite what you may have heard from a very famous Led Zeppelin song, you should never ramble on, meaning make your point, articulate your point, move on to the next thing. Try to avoid really for a long time doing what I'm doing all throughout this presentation and kind of talking at length about things beyond where you really need to. make your point, get on to the next thing. Try to avoid writing in the past tense. This is one of the rules that I kind of think is a little stupid, but it is a rule and it is something that Google will ding your SEO on. Writing in the past tense, or what's called passive voice, meaning that you're saying something like, Mark went to the warehouse. You should instead say, Mark will be at the warehouse, or Mark is going to the warehouse. Something that's set now or down the road rather than in the past. I don't know why Google cares about that, but Google cares. Emojis, please don't use emojis ever. There's never a time. On social media, emojis are okay. Never use emojis in a blog or on a landing page. They just look bad. They are going to slow down the reader, kind of like the two spaces thing. They slow down your eye. It takes you a second to interpret it, and they're kind of unprofessional. I know that you might just be lighthearted goofing off, but there's really never a time ever in content, long form content anyway, for emojis, other than social media where they can, work.
Hey, Matt.
Yeah.
Do you have stuff that's a bit more broad, like content based? Just because we're worried that we might get too specific into the writing aspect of things right now.
Yeah. Yeah, we can just skip to the next thing, really, because it's all kind of written down.
Yeah, so it was more just we don't want to get too specific into just blog writing because we don't know how many people might be here for just the idea of content rankings in general.
Yeah, all these rules do apply outside of your blog too. It is important to state that all of this is for your landing pages, for blogs if you're making them, for product descriptions and service descriptions. Basically, all of your internet written text should try to follow these rules as often as you can. Social media, a little more lax on those rules than other platforms, but if you're writing a blog or if you're writing a product description, just try to follow these rules. And there's another big wall of rules coming up here in a second too, but we'll try to just kind of go over the more important ones and skip on because I realize that we are running very late.
Yeah, because we want to try and answer as many questions as possible because we are getting close to time, so we just want to make sure that anyone that has questions can ask.
Sure. All right, so we're going to try to just speed round, try to get through the last of these. This page will explain how to get to find the best keywords. And I know Mary is going to be speaking. I think she's probably doing something on SEO, if I'm not mistaken. But as a general rule, you want to make sure that your keywords have really high search volume, meaning a lot of people are looking for them, and that they are not difficult. They're low competition, low difficulty. And there's a lot here, but we'll share this slide so that people can read it later and kind of go through and see what all these things mean. As a general rule, though, we mentioned earlier, question keywords are very big. So you've got product and service keywords, something like party tent or a bounce house that relate to the products and services that you're offering. Question keywords are answering specific questions. Then you have hyperlocal, local, and regional keywords, which break down as keywords that refer to the area that you're operating in. Whatever your hometown is or the town that you're working out of, you want to make sure that you're hitting those keywords. And you're incorporating them into your article because then when somebody types bounce house rental near me, that's how Google's going to know that it's talking about you and you're talking about the area that they're talking about so that they know you're close to them. So you want to try to incorporate those as well. Real quick explanation here. I say, Times Square in New York City. Times Square is hyper-local. It's a very specific area. Manhattan is where Times Square is. It's a broader kind of area. And then New York City or the tri-state area is the larger region that they involved in. You want to try to get all three of those types of keywords into your content as often as you can, especially with landing pages, because that's really where Google's going to be looking. A lot of rules for SEO writing. It's a very big, complicated subject. The biggest ones really are to never keyword stuff. Try to avoid using your keywords over and over and over again. Try to break up your text using header to or heading to. Um, you should, especially for blogs and landing pages, never run longer than 300 words um, before you have one of those and then you interrupt your text with it. Make sure you're using your focus keyword correctly. I would definitely take some time to look at this sheet and go over all these points that we're making so that you kind of know how to do this correctly, because it's all of these are hard rules you should not skip. You definitely want to do them.
We could probably share your slideshow right up on Facebook too. That way anyone can have access to it.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I'd really like it if we could do that, because I'd like them to have access to it.
Yeah.
We're almost done, though, is the good news. So the finishing touches, the last little things that you want to do when you're finishing up your article. Make sure you're following Yoast is the number one thing I can suggest when you're finishing up a landing page. If you happen to be writing it in WordPress, a lot of small businesses will. You want to take the time to follow the suggestions that Yoast is making. Make sure that you're as green as you can possibly be. Orange dots and red dots are bad. Try to avoid them wherever you can. Take your time and read it again. And that is not something that can be said enough times. A lot of people will write a thing, hit send, be done. Don't do that. You have to take your time, read it again, make sure that you're doing it correctly, that you're articulating what you need to. Split up your longer content, your sentences, your paragraphs. Make sure you break that down. Use high resolution photos and images. Don't just throw up a thing from your phone. It's very unprofessional, and also, it just kind of interrupts your content. It makes it poorly packaged, and you don't want that. And in Yoast, you're going to have meta information. Yoast will explain that to you when you start using it, but you're going to want to really take your time and go through and fill all of that out as accurately as you can. That is also very, very important. So 4 metrics that you're going to care about. And then we're basically done after that. There are 4 metrics that when you're writing blogs or landing pages, what have you, these are the ones that you really want to be paying attention to. So page views is every single time a person looks at your web page, you're going to get a page view. And a unique page view is one person who looked at your page. So let's say Matt had a website and I was clicking on him and I read his blog 5 times because I really liked it. So I'm going to give him 5 unique page views, or I'm going to give him 5 page views, but I'm only going to give him 1 unique page view because of one person clicking it 5 times. Average time on page is really important for a blog. It's your key indicator that somebody's actually sitting and digesting your content. If it's a longer article, you want longer time on page. If they're spending 20 or 30 seconds on a blog article, they're not actually reading it. There's something on that page that is turning them away. So you're going to want to take some time to look at it and figure out what. And then bounce rate. You want to keep bounce rate low for landing pages and product pages. For a blog, doesn't really matter, because really with a blog, your main objective for most of your content, especially question keywords, is making a person know that you exist and showing them the answer to the question they're looking for. That's going to put them in the back of their mind. They're going to know that you exist, and then they're going to come back to you later. 7 times out of 10, that person's going to come back to your website at some point because they know you and they know your brand. So bounce rate, don't worry so much for blogs. Unless that blog is really focused on, retention and that kind of thing, I wouldn't really worry about it. But it matters heavily for, landing pages and whatnot. You want to try to keep that low. And then this last page here is just a bunch of resources that you should bookmark. They're all pretty self-explanatory. The last one there is Boston University's AP Style Guide walkthrough. The AP Style Guide is extremely expensive. It's like hundreds of dollars. Don't buy it. You don't need to. All of the rules that actually matter for your content can be found on that sheet. And over the years, you'll Google it and you'll find more. So that's pretty much it. I'm sorry that it ran so long. It's big complicated subject. It's kind of difficult to break all this down in an hour. So yeah, if there are any questions, I can take those.
Yeah, so one of the questions we actually got asked was about ranking with website providers. Because this person here that asked, they actually brought up that they use Constant Contact as a website provider. So they were sort of wondering about if they're creating their own content, how would that help them rank with like that sort of website provider? Because you did mention earlier that like WordPress was a really good one. So I didn't. I think it was mostly like, could a website provider hurt you if you're still making good content?
Not necessarily. I mean, if you have a web host that is dinged by Google, like meaning that Google looks at that web post and they're like, that company's bad news. We're not going to deal with them. That'll hurt you, but for the most part, you're not really going to come across, especially a company like Constant Contact or a major outlet. Hosting companies and services generally won't hurt your ranking potential or your SEO too much. I mean, for the most part, it's really what you're doing on the page. It's the keywords that you're using and how you're using those keywords, the domain authority that you're building over time. I won't go into domain authority because I'm sure Mary's going to talk about that, but it is something that heavily matters and it helps you land the good keywords versus the bad keywords. So, I mean, if you look at a company and you think that they're trustworthy, I mean, I can say from experience that Constant Contact is a very well-known, well-established business. I wouldn't worry about it. If it's, Billy Bob's House of SEO or something, and it's got like a foreign extension on the end of it, like, dot some country that's not here, if they're not a secure website, meaning that you have the little lock icon in the upper corner of the address bar. If it's an unsecure site, maybe rethink whether or not you want to use that service.
I know I can add too, because you talked about those four metrics earlier. That because you've talked how this is content, like you spoke on it from the key point of like the blog, because that's what you do. But it's like you said, that works for a lot of things. Like honestly, if you just replace the word page with video on those metrics, that's a lot of what you'll run into on YouTube. I'm sure Justin, who's in the chat, knows that and has been seeing it himself.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, you talked about something that very much correlates to any sort of content people can use and relate back to. So even if you're not necessarily looking to do a blog, looking at Matt's presentation regardless will be very helpful for whatever way you're trying to utilize.
Yeah, for sure. These rules apply to every piece of content that you're going to handle. I mean, like they get applied. I mean, even the SEO stuff doesn't really matter for like an email per se, but the other rules do. If you're writing an email, you should be following a style guide. You should have that content presentable, packaged in a professional, meaningful way. If you're doing a flyer or a catalog or a brochure, and you're going to include a lot of text, you should be breaking up those sentences and those paragraphs so that it's reading better and cleaner. So you don't necessarily have to apply this just to a blog. I think that it's pretty universal, applies to just about everything that you're doing in terms of writing.
And I guess as we wait to see if any more questions come up, one other question I think could help people with this is because we've run into it a few times where Brett or Mark will bring up to you a topic that they want you to cover in the blog that we know might not get the best SEO traction. So how do you help balance that out with topics that you know should be covered but probably won't get those views as high up as others?
Yeah. So we didn't really kind of blast it through some of the SEO stuff there. It is available on this slide, which we will share a link to. But you might not have a good focus keyword for every article. You might have a focus keyword that is kind of crummy. But you can still land really good related keywords. So your focus keyword's your main keyword. That's the one that you're trying to hit. And then your related keywords are ones that are similar. So let's say commercial inflatables was my main keyword. I might be going for bounce house, inflatable water slide, inflatable slip and slide, inflatable obstacle course, etc. Because they're related keywords, you can work those in, and then Google's going to look at it and go, okay, that's they're talking about inflatables, and they've got all this other related information that they're also using to talk about inflatables. So really, when you're kind of stuck with a not great keyword, it's got lower volume and it's maybe a higher difficulty level, I like to try to just spice it up with not going overboard or going crazy, but just adding more of those related keywords to try and kind of beef up your content a little bit that way. You can also kind of rely on, if you have a stronger social media presence, you can rely on social media to get your message out. If you're doing emails, you might work that content into your emails instead of only relying on SEO or only relying on organic page views. That also is a good idea, I think.
Yeah. It doesn't look like we had any more questions coming in. So, yeah, I think we'll be able to wrap this up here. This will be on YouTube probably tomorrow morning at this point. We're going to put your slideshow that you created for this out there as well so that people can access that. And if anyone has questions outside of this, I know we'll normally answer them on Facebook. You provided your email, I think, in the slideshow, so they can
Yeah,
contact you as well.
yeah, for sure. It's mterzi at tenttable.com. And if we have a second to just kind of throw this in there as well, if you have a website and you're looking for backlinks, backlinks are incredibly valuable to SEO. If you've been trying to learn about SEO, I'm sure that you already know about backlinks. So it's like one of the first things that you should really be talking about with building an SEO strategy for a website. I'm always happy to talk about sharing backlinks with just about anybody. As long as your website is secured, I'm happy to discuss sharing backlinks with you. I think that that's sort of a communal thing that everyone should just be happy to share backlinks. It helps us, it helps you. So, shoot me an email. And if you have any questions about content or SEO, it might take me a minute to get back to you. We tend to, our marketing team can be pretty busy sometimes, but please do take your time, email me, and I will be more than happy to help however I can. I can talk about content, as you just saw, at great length, tirelessly. So if you have any questions at all, please don't hesitate to shoot me a message, and I'll be more than happy to help however I can.
All right. Well, thank you, Matt. Thanks everyone that joined us. And we don't have anything else coming today, but tomorrow we have Larry's going to be talking a little bit at noon, I believe. And then we may or may not do some fun giveaway stuff later in the day.